Hey everyone, welcome to Wildlife Inspired. Today I'm going to talk about a button on your camera that may help you in certain situations. I'm going to give you two practical situations on how I use this button and how I set it up, and we'll get to it right after this. So I have this theory about magic buttons and how they don't exist. I think most of the time as a photographer, we should be focused on technique. Especially with wildlife photography, how we are achieving our images out in the field, a focus on light and composition. Those are the things I think that make great photographs. However, when it comes to gear, there are some little tips and tricks that can help you in certain situations. So I'm going to set up back here. You can see behind me I've got my 70-200 and my 400 2.8. I'm going to show you a button that is available on many lenses, not all lenses, that you can actually program that may help you in certain situations. So I'm going to go back there and show you the buttons, and I'm going to show you the exact situations that I use them in. All right, Scott, so what is this button? Well, it's not available in every camera/lens combination. And it really is a button that focuses on the lens, not the camera body. Most of the time when we're programming our cameras and we're looking at button setups, we are thinking about the body itself and how are we going to program those buttons to suit our needs. But many lenses, and it tends to be the more expensive prime lenses, but many lenses are going to have a button that is actually built in to the lens. Now on the Nikon systems, I am going to show you quickly where that button is located. This is a 70-200, and this is my Z mounted lens. You'll see that button right there. Can I get focus on you, please? So right here, there we go. So you'll see the button right here. There's actually two of them. You could see one up here where my index finger is and one here where my middle finger is. And those buttons are programmable, meaning you can assign them functions, and it's not one function, there's a whole menu. In fact, I'm going to pop up the Nikon menu if you're a shooter, and I'll scroll through here and I'll show you exactly where to find it in your customized menus. So you'll see there's the lens assignment location and then a whole list of functions that you can do it. Now, you may have a reason to use this button. So there may be one of these assignments that you wish to assign to this button that you're not even using because you weren't sure what that button was for. But again, your major camera manufacturers, and I'll just for wildlife, Sony, Canon, Nikon, maybe Olympus, but we'll stick to those three. They all have this feature on their high-end prime lenses, and it goes down and it starts at some focal length, sometimes around 100 millimeters, but the 70-200s generally is where you start seeing this button assigned. I'm going to show you on my 400 where this is located. So you'll see here, I pulled the lens coat back and you'll see a button here. There's actually four of them. They go all around the surface. And I use these buttons. But I'm going to show you exactly a practical application for how I use these buttons. So I'm not using it as my primary autofocus, but you can actually use this button the same way you might use back button focusing, where you're holding the back button to focus. You can actually do that with the lens button, should you assign it that way. But it also has a what's called memory recall. So if you look right here, there's a little button, and that button on this camera is going to say memory set. What that allows me to do is program one of or all of these buttons to focus at a specific location, a predetermined location. So in other words, when I hit that button, my focus will go to that spot. So where does this come in handy? Well, I've got two scenarios that I use this for, and I use these on a fairly regular basis, especially this time of year. So first situation, I'm shooting hawks, and it is very common when I'm shooting these birds in flight, and I'm sure you guys have experienced this, a bird is flying through, you miss focus for a second, it grabs the background, and you have trouble finding that bird. And you only have a short window to reacquire the focus. So what I try to do is I'll find the sweet spot. So previous to any bird coming through, I will focus out to a predetermined area. So I look through here, I find an area where I think is the sweet spot where those birds are going to be flying through. And at my location, there is a kind of a spot in the middle of the mountains where they tend to come over a ridge and they fly through this area. Now, if I miss focus on them, and I don't want any Nikon jokes about how Nikon is missing focus and your Sony just acquires focus and holds it, or how your R5 is perfect and you don't need to worry about this. I can predetermine where I think that bird is going to be. And if I'm here and I lose focus and it hits the back of the trees, I can hit this button and I'll let you hear the lens. It just racked to reacquire focus to that predetermined point. So maybe it's 100 yards out or 50 yards out, whatever that distance is where I'm shooting birds in flight. If I miss it and it drops off and it grabs the trees in the background, I can quickly hit this button. It's going to pull the focus back to that predetermined area, 50 or 100 yards, and that'll allow me to quickly find that bird again. And it helps then reacquire the autofocus on where it should be. Make sense? So I'm using a predetermined distance for birds in flight. Should I lose that, rather than try to find it in the lens and try to have it hunt, I'm going to bring it back and help the autofocus system by bringing the focus very close to where that bird is going to be. And now I can reacquire it very quickly. So that's the first one, using the memory recall button to predetermine for birds in flight the sweet spot of a flight pattern. Use that button if you miss focus to bring it back into that area and reacquire focus. I will tell you, I find this very, very helpful during migration season when I'm shooting hawks. Now, what is the second reason that I do this? I actually do this for songbirds. So the 400 focuses down to about 8 feet. And what will often happen is I'm shooting songbirds out in an area. Again, a lot of this is during migration for me, and I get some very, very close looks. So 8 to 10 to 12 feet, very close. And in those close areas, there may be other branches around. And what can often happen is a bird surprisingly pops in close. I take my camera. He drops in 8 feet away. I go to focus and it can't find that area. It either grabs a branch too close, maybe in front of the bird, or it's just searching out beyond the bird because the bird is really, really, really close. So how does this help me? Well, in those situations where I'm focused on songbirds, I'll actually change that focus recall down to about 8 feet, maybe 10 feet. So very, very, very close, almost minimum focus. Now, could I manually dial the ring all the way down to minimum focus? Yes, but I find it easier to use that memory recall button just to hit the button and have the lens pull back. You may also have these perfect perches. I call them fantasy perches. So you've got this dream perch that's pretty close, like 10 feet away, and you're like, boy, if a bird lands on that thing, I am gonna be golden. But I don't predict that. So in a lot of my photography, I'm shooting these songbirds or warblers in their natural environments, and I'm not staging a setup. So I don't use often a water feature or callback to call them onto a specifically set up perch. I like to play around with the environment. I like what's there. I like to try to use what's existing. So on a setup where I know where the perch is, not a big deal. I'm going to be focused there the whole time waiting for it to land. But where I may have a bird over here or a bird over here and then one pop up from over here and it hits that fantasy perch, I can preset that button to focus right at the fantasy perch. So I'm up here 20 feet away. Now I'm 15 feet away. I'm 30 feet away. And now the bird hits the fantasy perch, and watch, I'm not even going to have my hand over here. I'm just using this button. I don't know if you could hear that. So I want to focus out. Now listen. You can hear the lens pull back the focus right to that area that I wanted. So for the first scenario, birds in flight, I'm predetermining a distance out into a sweet spot or a zone that I might think that they'll fly through to help me reacquire focus at some point. And in the short distance scenario, I'm using it to capture mostly songbirds, either on that fantasy perch where I can predetermine the focus and focus right there at that fantasy, or to minimum focus where the camera may have trouble racking all the way back to the area where that bird has landed really, really close. So those are my two practical applications. I want to remind you, you're not limited to those. It is a button that's available and often overlooked. I've had a lot of people ask me what that button is for. Hopefully this helps you out a little bit with those, but what it really was is to give you these practical applications that you might want to try the next time you're out in the field shooting birds or any wildlife. So hopefully you found those helpful. I'm going to run back to the desk and wrap up. So that's the practical application for how I use this lens button or this memory recall button in terms of focus, but there are many applications and I would love to know how you use it. if you've got it available on your lens. Now, these tips and tricks I sometimes put on my YouTube content for free, but I also have a subscription site where I have a lot more of these tips and tricks, and I take you with me behind the scenes. I show you a lot of editing things as well. So if you're interested in that, make sure you check out my Patreon account. I'll put some information down there at the bottom. I also want to thank you for your ongoing and continued support. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so that we can continue to find inspiration in wildlife together.